Good. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here. And before I start my more prepared remarks, I would like to recognise a few people. Joan of Collins, of course, she is and will forever remain a British icon, an English icon, and I'm sure that I speak for everybody to say that as a mother, as a friend, as a performer, she has set standards that are an inspiration and an example to us all. Prime Minister Johnson, Boris, your remarks, of course, speak for themselves. The only thing I can possibly add to that is to say that I wish there were more people of the power of your intellect and personality to burst the supercilious and balloon of those sneaky, woke socialists. I would like also to recognise two other people, but the problem I have with that is that they both believe that their considerable accomplishments should remain discreet. And forgive me when I say and address them, and they will understand it, is all I can say is that down Rochester Way, there is much special inspiration and courage to be found, especially by a maestro. I would like to thank and, of course, congratulate Donald for a blank piece of paper 2 years ago to this extraordinary evening is a Herculean task of even truly Thatcherite accomplishments, and my mother would be both impressed and proud. Finally, of course, Connor Burns, he is and remains a cherished friend of our family. Chief Commoner, Excellency, Ministers, friends of Margaret Thatcher, your Lordships, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a special pleasure for Sarah and I to be here with you this evening. And it is the honour of my life to address some of her oldest friends on this, the centenary of my mother's birth, to recount and to recall some of those beliefs that Margaret Thatcher held to be both essential and self-evident. As she would say, her fundamental truths. A man's right to work as he will, to spend what he earns, to own his own property, to have the state as a servant and not as a master. And it is the family and not the state that is the basic institution of our society. And most importantly, it is the economic freedom upon which all of these other freedoms depend. Unless we produce wealth, there will be none to spend on essential services, pensions, hospitals, and the like. Much as a socialist government may wish it, no government can create wealth. Government can destroy wealth by removing incentives, but it is only private enterprise that creates wealth. And all government governments must encourage it. Increased taxation only disincentivizes. To all socialists, my mother would say, there is no such thing as government money. There is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayers' money. And as Rachel from Accounts, as Boris so actually said, as Rachel from Accounts continues to struggle with the simple problems of basic arithmetic, my mother's comment would surely be, socialism is a wonderful thing until other people's money runs out. if socialist envy and dogma continues to drive confiscatory tax policy, everybody loses. Opportunity dies, and as Boris has already said, talent flees the country, as it is already doing now. Tax payments have reached total saturation. Further increases only will reduce total receipts, as we're seeing already. More taxes this year will demand greater taxation again next year, because the receipts will be less, and yet more people will have fled the country. On the other hand, if governments tax less, people will have more money to spend, and even more importantly, they will have the chance to keep and invest more of what they earn. We are long past the days of the socialist dream of wealth distribution. Today, 10% of our nation's population pays 62% of its taxes. Less taxation equals greater wealth production for us all. In the last quarter in the US, it grew by 0.7%, the United Kingdom by 0.3%, less than half. The net result, 1.1 million people under the age of 30 are now unemployed. No Labour government has left office with less unemployed than they started at the beginning of their government. And so this government has finally proved something that we always knew. Labour isn't working. My mother would wish that I say a few words on defence. Our first duty to freedom must be to defend it. And the price of freedom has always remained the same: eternal vigilance. Resolve is not enough. We must maintain the necessary military capacity to enforce that resolve, as Boris has so eloquently put, far better than I. Putin only ventured into Ukraine a second time exactly because NATO's military capacity was incapable of enforcing its political resolve, even after his first invasion. Consistent defence underspending is there for all to see, not least of which by our enemies. We must urgently increase our defence spending to meet the demands of today's world. Labour's promise to do so over the next 5 years, quote unquote, is not enough. That is a typical kick it down the road reaction forced upon our unwilling government, afraid that such a commitment will erode their sacred socialist spending priorities. In 1990, as Boris had referred to it, the Western heads of government met in Aspen, Colorado for an annual get-together. And at that particular moment in time, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in what became Gulf War II. George Bush was hesitant to mobile American forces, and of course, Mother came up with that wonderful expression of which we've already heard, "Now is not the time to go wobbly, George." To which I can add, with great pride, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. My mother would wish me to remind you all of her steadfast commitment to the nuclear deterrent. It has kept peace for decades, and it will continue to keep peace for many more decades to come. Defence also includes the English Channel. Under Labour, more people have crossed the English Channel illegally in a single day than crossed in the entire 5-year period of the Second World War. More people in one day than in 5 years of the greatest war in our history. Of course, legal migrants have great value. Illegal migrants don't. And by their sheer numbers, they have produced an adverse effect. And Boris has commented far more eloquently on it than I may. But one thing is certain, the costs are untenable, even for a socialist government. The spectacular increase in support for reform creates the perfect storm for Labour. Their reverent pursuit of naked socialism now has to be constrained by the concerns that they have, quite rightly, for their own political survival. And that is realism for them. There is little that I can say or even add to anything about privatisation that has not already been said. £60 billion brought into the Exchequer and billions more continues to be contributed in annual corporation taxes as businesses blossom when breathing the free air of private ownership. The same can also be said of council home ownership. My mother gave 1 million families the opportunity to buy their own home. And for me personally, I feel that this was one of her greatest achievements. Of course, socialists hate the idea of private ownership and the independence that it brings. Mum was born 100 years ago today to a principled Methodist father who taught her that one should always spend judiciously, save what you can, borrow only what you can afford to repay. And from those principles, my mother came to understand high savings are necessary for high investment, and public spending should be strictly limited. I have always had in my mind that there was a certain destiny in my mother's early life. Mention, I think, must also be made of Airy Neve. He guided her, he assisted her, and in times of self-doubt, yes, even Margaret Thatcher did have self-doubt. Rarely, but she did. In times of self-doubt, Airy protected her against the internecine political infighting in the 1975 leadership election. As you know, Airy was assassinated by the IRA because of its friendship with my mother. I say this only because the murder of Airy Neve was one of the darkest days of my mother's life. But in that moment of darkness, my mother was forced to look into herself to find the courage and the determination to move forward anew. And in that moment, when she emerged from this darkness, she became the leader that she was. Sadly, my mother is no longer with us. But her legacy, her beliefs, and indeed her fundamental truths live on now more than ever. We all, as her disciples, her friends, her Praetorian Guard, must vouchsafe and defend these beliefs. We must once again fight and win the battle of ideas, as she did. We must ensure that the eternal vigilance that she demands of us all remains ever present. It is for this eternal vigilance that guarantees those freedoms that define us as a nation, that define us as a people, and that define us as individuals. Armed with her strength of her beliefs, the strength of her beliefs, with the might of her inspiration, we cannot, we must not fail. Thank you.